Call to order a special meeting for the normal local liquor commission. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Coos?
Here.
Mr. Fretzen?
Here.
Mr. Preston is not here. Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy is not here. Ms. Gaines?
Here.
The purpose of this special meeting is to consider the applications of two businesses, the first of which is a liquor license application for White Oak Brewing LLC at 1801 Industrial Park Drive, and this is for the new Class P taproom liquor license. Motion for approval?
Move approval.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Mr. Fritzen?
I was a little confused when I read the report. The taproom liquor license is for retail off-premises consumption only. I know it's new, so, and what's the nature of the White Oak Brewing business?
Let me just handle the first part of your question. It depending on the zoning district that the business lies within, it could also be permit a tasting room, if you will. But currently, that activity is not allowed within the manufacturing zoning district, in which White Oak Brewing is located. Further, in order to provide for on-premise consumption, there would have to be some building modifications made to the facility at White Oak Brewing. So by issuing this license, it basically allows White Oak to sell packaged liquor retail, but it would not provide for on-premise consumption, given their current zoning limitations and given some limitations with their current facility.
So this is the only class license that would allow that, the packaged liquor sale?
Package referring to his own product,
His own product, yeah. His own, not other,
not a package license.
right,
Okay.
but prepackaged product that he produces at that location, or she produces.
Okay.
And it is a,
It's just a little, like I said, it's a new license, a new class, and when you're thinking tap room, we're talking, all our conversation last time was about tasting, and here we're talking about a retail sale, so I'm just trying to
yeah,
put it all together.
It generally speaking, in many cases, it would allow for tasting as well as selling your product on a package basis, but given the limitations in their building as well as the zoning, in this case, they would only be eligible to sell packaged retail of their product. They may at some point attempt to make whatever changes are necessary in order to qualify for a tasting room, but they're not able to at this time.
And this is a craft beer operation?
Correct.
That currently sells in other retail outlets, I assume?
There's, I think, mostly in restaurant environments.
Thank you.
Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
The Class P license is approved. We have a request for a liquor license application for B&M 16 Incorporated, doing business as Cousins Restaurant at 113 North Main Street in Normal. And this is for a Class D all liquor on-premises consumption license. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
The Class D liquor license is approved. That concludes our business on liquor tonight. Motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. Call to order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for October 3rd, 2016. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos?
Here.
Mr. Fritzen?
Here.
Mr. Preston is not here. Mr. McBride?
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy is not here. Ms. Gaines?
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get into the Omnibus Agenda, we've had requests, multiple requests, for people to address the council tonight. I will remind the addressees that we limit comment to 3 minutes, and when you come forward, please state your name and address for the record. And we'll start in the order we received the requests, and that would be starting with Mr. Ron Ulmer.
Thank you. I'm Ron Ulmer, and I live at 1114 North Linden Street, Normal, and I'm going to address the proposed agreement with WSP Parsons Brinkeroff of New York related to the proposed pedestrian crossing. 1, I believe that at least one qualified engineering firm could be found in Chicago or St. Louis areas to perform the engineering services, resulting in a lower cost with a larger percent of the contract employing Illinois residents and the money spent at the state and local level. 2, I contacted the Illinois Commerce Commission Rail Safety Program Administrator, Michael Steed, in December 2014. He wrote that no regulation or law exists requiring that a pedestrian crossing be an underpass or overpass, although the ICC routinely recommends an under or overpass. The 4 stakeholders, the Union Pacific Railroad, the ICC, IDOT, and the town of Normal, were all involved in the planning of the current Amtrak station. It is beyond my comprehension that none of these entities brought up or discussed the grade level crossing by trail or rail users. The failure to plan and or build a crossing during the planning stage and building stage of the Uptown Station is a monumental failure by 3 government entities in the UP that will cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in inconvenience. 4, as a reference, I and over 100 other children walked across a triple set of Indiana Harbor Belt Railway tracks 4 times per day on the way to and from grades K through 8, and numerous other times to go to play areas and visit friends. To my knowledge, no child has been injured or killed crossing these tracks at grade beginning in the early 1950s, and it still goes on today, more than 6 decades later. Several children have been hit by vehicles while walking to school, but none by trains. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Doug Fansler.
Hi, I'm Doug Vansel. I live at 307 Carriage Hills Road. I'm a taxpayer that is kind of curious about why we're spending this money, and I've got a few statements and a couple questions. I know it's not a question-answer session, but I'm assuming that most of this will be addressed during your discussion related to the spending for the overpass. To my knowledge, we originally had spent money on a study for an overpass long ago in order to consider whether to spend the money that was a part of this building. We spent money also to consider what the funding was for that overpass. Those may have been one thing. I'm not sure if it was 2 separate things, but the final decision came down to spend just short of $200,000 to add concrete and things that's for an overpass at some point when they built this building. There was another study at some point to decide whether or not we needed to build an overpass or an underpass. I don't know what was spent on that. I'd like to hear that tonight, and cumulative for all this. The FAR study was done in order to develop the Uptown South, or the area that's on the other side of the overpass, underpass. There was a lot of money spent on that as well. Today we're talking about another study that's going to spend a little over $1 million in order to rehash and redo much of the same that we've already done many times over, a few times over. What I'd like to understand and hope that every councilman and Mayor and anyone that's going to be speaking tonight, I would like to understand that you have all those details in your head, and you know, either you've asked for it or you've considered it as part of your decision, how much money's been spent to date. How many bids were considered, especially for this, this study? Has any news agency asked for these details? And I don't know why they wouldn't have reported those in the paper in order to help the taxpayers understand why we're spending money on a study yet again. Do all the council members have this information in their hands today to help make decisions? If they don't, I don't know how you would make a decision, good decision, not considering all the money that we've already, of taxpayer money that's already been spent. Why spend more money at this point is the public sentiment seems to be against this. Everything that I've seen either online or the people that I talk to, I run into very few people that want to spend more money, let alone on the funding, but on the overpass or the underpass. In conjunction with that, I have a voicemail from, I contacted High Speed Rail, Illinois High Speed Rail many times. They aren't very fast in answering questions, but I did get an answer back in the form of a voicemail that they told me there was no plans through 2017, which at the time I called, that is the longest, farthest that they go out, to have more than 2 trains stop at this station, or to have a need for the additional side that we're being planned for. That's all I have.
And the last speaker tonight is Mark Tiratilli.
Hi, I'm Mark Tiratilli. I live at 1212 Timber Ridge Court here in Normal. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm here to voice my opposition to the study for the proposed rail crossing. I understand this is part of the Tiger Grant proposal process, that you need this feasibility study in order to apply for tens of millions of federal dollars for this. I still maintain this is a wrong move. There's no guarantee that this underpass could be built. There's no guarantee that the Tiger Grant will come through. Even if it does, we will still have to contribute millions of dollars to the process. We're going to have to borrow that money. I was here a few weeks ago for the financial report. The town's officer sat in this very chair and said, we are $96 million in debt. We cannot borrow any more money without new revenue. We've raised taxes twice consecutively on sales. We've raised taxes on so many other things. We pay more sales tax than over 90% of the residents of Illinois in this small little community of ours. This is a misguided priority. There's more projects on the way. Even if we did approve this, we're talking about moving the police station because we want to move the library. We're going to move Parks and Rec. We're going to build housing. There's probably close to another $100 million worth of projects on the docket. The master plans are there, and I know everybody's trying to be in lockstep and move this forward, but this is not what the residents want. You sat here and heard from other residents tonight. They don't share the same vision. I would surmise that those that might probably don't realize the financial condition of the town. We don't want to borrow more money. We want the roads fixed. We're going to spend more on this study than we spend on resurfacing roads in the entire town. In past years, yes, we have. Yes, I know we got an election coming. So, with all that in mind, I would argue that we need a different vote. We need to vote no on this proposal. We need to wait. We need to get our finances in better condition. Thank you.
That concludes our public comments tonight. We move to the Omnibus Agenda. These are items that will be taken by with one vote by the council, unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And I would like to be excused from voting on any bills I may have incurred in my duties as mayor. No. Motion for approval?
Move approval.
Items considered tonight in the vote are approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 19th, 2016, and approval of Town of Normal expenditures for payment as of September 28th, 2016. A resolution to accept water treatment plant chemical bids for November 2016 through October 2017. A resolution approving an agreement with Chestnut Global Partners for Employee Assistance Program services. A resolution accepting bids and authorizing the purchase of a tandem axle dump truck, and that is from Truck Centers Incorporated of Morton, Illinois, at a net cost of $81,785, including a trade-in. A resolution accepting bids for, and authorizing the purchase of a forklift truck for the Public Works Waste Removal Division from Fitzgerald Equipment Company Incorporated. That's in the amount of $22,733.70. Resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement for employment of the municipal manager. A resolution authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement with 121 East Beaufort Properties, LLC, for the facade rehabilitation of 121 and 123 East Beaufort Street and the required budget adjustment. Please call the roll.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The omnibus agenda is approved. We have one item of general orders, and that's a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement with WSP Parsons Brinkerhoff for Phase 1 engineering services related to the proposed pedestrian rail crossing in Uptown Normal in an amount not to exceed $1,426,111.40. Motion for approval.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Peterson?
Mayor, if I could just interject here, you received a slight modification to a section in Exhibit A of the agreement, and it's noted in red, and I want to thank Ms. Lorenz for bringing this to our attention. She was scanning the document and noticed what may have been a little inconsistency with the intent, but it indicated in Exhibit A, when it was talking about the scope of the study, that the consultant may require reevaluation of all or both identified alternatives, and there's likely more than two. So, and it was our intent that they will evaluate all feasible alternatives. And so we've clarified the language, and we think this is more reflective of our intent. So we would offer that as a slight modification to the agreement that's been presented to you this evening.
Thank you. Discussion? Mr. Fritzen?
Yeah, in studying the numbers a little bit here, I think, I don't know about my colleagues, but, when I saw 1.4 million, I thought, oh my goodness, how did we get to 1.4 million? I try to look at the breakdown of the chart, but, there's a lot of numbers there. The biggest chunk is the preliminary engineering documents, and I guess the word preliminary there throws me a little bit. I'm not sure, how close does that get us? If there's the alternative analysis as well included, of course, and as some of the speakers mentioned, we have looked at other alternatives along the way, spent money on other alternatives along the way to study those, and did retrofit this building or incorporate into the construction of this building the foundation for the future overpass that we've set aside for now. But the alternative analysis is going to, I assume, is going to end up with this is the best proposal, the best way to go about it, and then there are the preliminary engineering documents. So how close do preliminary engineering documents get us to? Where does that take us? It's not; those aren't working documents. I take it. Are they close to working documents? Or are they?
They're not working documents in the sense that a contractor can take them and build a project, but they're very, very far along in that regard. So, again, after we make the alternatives, pick the alternative, the plans are further developed. And in the case of a structure, as we may propose an overpass or an underpass, there are very detailed engineering documents done. So much of the engineering is completed. So we actually have dimension plans in that case of what the structure is, to the extent that then the designers that take it over, just add a few details, specifications, things like that. So for a structure, Phase 1 gets very far along such that we can see what the structure is, and other engineers can just take that and add the final construction documents. And of course, this will expand, away from the tracks a bit and identify accessibility issues and grading, things like this, landscape architecture. So in a sense, our intention is that this gets us very far along as far as a set of plans. Most, if not all, of the documents included in a preliminary set of engineering documents are included in the final plans for guidance.
Typically with engineering firms and whatever, we get a chart of so much per hour for a principal, so much an hour for a lead engineer, so much per hour, whatever. So I just noodle a little bit here. If I'm spending $1.4 million and I don't know what the average would be, maybe $150 an hour, because you're going to have some lower, you're going to have some higher. I don't know if that's a reasonable number or not, but we're talking over 9,000 man hours to create this, and well over half of it is in the analysis of the alternatives and the preliminary drawings. So as I kind of tried to get my head around this thing, because it is a huge chunk of money, and at first glance it's kind of like, whoa, it's an alarming amount of money, but my sense was that, and you've kind of confirmed this already, that at some point in time along the timeline, that money's going to have to be spent, whether it be at this point in this study with this firm, or before you construct something, this amount of money is going to be spent. So it's all kind of one big chunk right here, which feels a little bit hard to swallow, but at some point in time, the same money is going to be spent some way. So
Yes.
if this were smaller, well, then maybe we just get an analysis, and then we'd have to do the preliminary plans, and so we'd spend that $500,000 for the preliminary plan in a different, later. But it'd still be spending the same money, right? Am I
Yeah, I
right
mean,
sense of
other
that?
projects, because we're anticipating federal funding or other types of funding, we want to cover all those bases. So there's many extra steps we have to take and reports we have to write that are included in Phase 1 that may not be included in other projects that we would typically do. But you are correct, this is all money on a federal project of this that we anticipate that would have to be spent. Similar to, for example, East Side Highway types of projects where they do Phase 1.
Funding sources, where will all these funds come from? I assume there are multiple sources that will be used.
These are discretionary capital funds that we have. Ultimately, they come from the general fund, but these are discretionary dollars that we have available that we've set aside already in the budget. We projected $1.5 million for the study. Weren't sure how close that was. We thought we might be a little light, so I was pleased that it came in under that. And remember, this is a not to exceed figure. If it's ultimately that the overall time commitment and the cost is less, we'll just pay what the actual cost is, but there's a not to exceed of $1.426 million. But these are discretionary local funds that we've earmarked for this project.
Now, the at-grade crossing was brought up, and it was mentioned in a news article that that's not under consideration at this point in time, but there's been a lot of discussion with the proper authorities on an at-grade crossing. And at one point in time, we were hopeful this was going to happen, but at this point in time, it doesn't look like that's the case. So can you give us just a brief history of that, because it has been something that's been discussed?
Initially, when we were discussing the project with IDOT and the Union Pacific Railroad, in regard to the overpass that ultimately got deleted from the previous contract, we talked about, is there a way to get folks across the tracks to serve the other platform? And the railroad brought this up. We may require, a temporary pedestrian crossing, at-grade crossing. No one really liked that alternative. And so they went back and discussed this further, meaning the Union Pacific Railroad, and ultimately determined that that was not what they wanted to do. And typically, the state certainly agreed, and although the question wasn't posed to the Illinois Commerce Commission, typically they would oppose that type of a scenario. So where we're at during this time being, anticipating an MOU with the Union Pacific and IDOT, is that pedestrians would cross at the Broadway Street crossing, for example, and the Linden Street crossing, which are protected crossings after the gates get put up and the fencing gets put up. So again, none of these groups, or at least at this point in time, support a temporary at-grade crossing.
And even if we did have an at-grade crossing, that would not be for the general public use, correct? It would just be for those that are using
Right.
the
And that's
rail-
when
the
we
rail
were
facilities.
discussing this with the railroad and others, they said, yes, it would be purely for Amtrak users.
We wouldn't be able to run trail traffic through there like we have in the past, okay.
Let me,
go
if
ahead.
I could just add to that, I think it's important information that was mentioned earlier, the Commerce Commission. The Illinois Commerce Commission controls certain crossings. They do not control a crossing next to the station here. That's considered a private crossing. They can certainly weigh in on it, but they have no jurisdiction over a crossing, a mid-block crossing at the station. They do have jurisdiction when you have crossings with roadways and in other areas. So that's why the Illinois Commerce Commission may have told somebody that they didn't have jurisdiction or they had no rule against it. However, the railroad does not permit, and they own the right-of-way, they do not permit permanent at-grade crossings. They were willing to consider a temporary at-grade crossing, but ultimately, I think after evaluating that alternative, even they said it's not a good idea. So the at-grade crossing is not an option for us, and it's not our call, it's the call of the railroad, and that decision is supported by the Federal Railroad Administration and IDOT, as well as the Commerce Commission, even though the Commerce Commission doesn't have any direct authority to specifically restrict an at-grade crossing. They certainly recommend against them for safety purposes.
The reference to previous studies, I mean, obviously, like we said, that when this building was constructed, it was determined to put foundational structure in place for the future proposed overpass. We've done the Uptown 2.0 planning study. That's really what brought the underpass idea to light. We've done a study to determine if structurally you even could go under. Before we go too far down the road thinking that we want to go under, or that's the preferable way to go, it was studied and people looked at it and said, you actually can do this. I don't, but there's a good question, how much money have we spent to date, but the difference between what has been spent to date and what is going to be spent here is, as I understand, as we clarified earlier, that the deliverable here is something that really is a giant step towards getting something going. Is that correct? And so, what else has transpired up to this date? Anything besides what I mentioned there? Or?
Let me just say, when this building was constructed, when it was designed and those plans were reviewed by every possible federal agency as well as the railroad and Amtrak, at that time there was absolutely no suggestion to the town that our at-grade crossing would not be permitted, that we had for years right outside. I've crossed it hundreds and hundreds of times. And that was our expectation, that at-grade crossing was there and was usable. It was not till this building was well under construction to a point where modifications were virtually impossible that we were told by then various agencies, including the railroad and the FRA, that, oh, yes, we should have mentioned that that at-grade crossing has to be removed. We can point fingers all day long, but the fact of the matter is we didn't know about it until this project was well underway. At that time, we began looking at alternatives, and we did look at the underpass. In fact, actually constructed some foundation work when it was convenient on the corner of this building that would support a part of an underpass structure. To do it, it was much more efficient to do it at that time, and we were able to do it before the plaza was completed. And we did undertake some study and design work on the feasibility of an overpass, because at that point, we thought that was really the only viable alternative. It was later, as we began looking at the Uptown 2.0 plan and began to consider the development potential on the south side of the tracks, that we realized that the overpass was probably not a good solution. It would probably work, but would not be a good long-term solution to move pedestrians from one side of the tracks to the other. And it was at that point that we had lengthy discussions with the council. This was the subject of numerous public meetings, and the overwhelming public sentiment at the time was the underpass was a better alternative, albeit likely more expensive, but in the long run, it was clearly the community consensus, and there were hundreds of people involved in those meetings that concluded that the underpass was the better alternative. So at that point, the city council said, let's put a halt on the overpass project, and let's look at the underpass along with other alternatives. And I do want to stress that this process we're talking about here today will take another look at other alternatives, like a bridge, like a overpass similar to what we had constructed, and any other, and they'll look at even a no-build alternative. What if we don't do anything? What will the impact of that be? They will look at all these alternatives, and as well as the underpass, and ultimately they will come back with a recommendation as to which approach they feel is the best approach to accomplish our goals. And if it is the underpass, which I believe that it likely will be, but we'll see, then they will spend significantly more time and energy addressing that alternative and providing a lot of specific detail. Most of the heavy lifting on this project is done at the Phase 1 level. It's unfortunate it's called preliminary engineering, that's what it's called, and that sounds sort of like a back-of-the-envelope sketch, but it really is a tremendous amount of work. This is 2 years of effort involving a consulting team that has many, many members. So it's a massive effort, and part of what they will be also looking at is identifying funding sources to construct this thing, federal and other. And so when we get the report done, not only will we be able to answer a lot of questions that we cannot answer today, in terms of how will it be built and how much it will cost and what it will look like and other construction and design considerations, but we'll also hopefully get some really good information on funding sources that will be helpful to us going forward.
Let me add on that, too. In the light of the fact that this building was well-constructed before we were told we needed an overpass, I don't think anybody felt that the overpass scenario that we came up with was elegant and was going to function very well. We were very doubtful the ability to move 150 to 200 people trying to get onto the other side of the tracks in a timely manner. And in the light of what came out of Uptown 2.0 discussion and the development in that area that would occur, we knew that overpass would definitely not function, because it originally was only designed for Amtrak patrons, not for general use.
Correct.
So to add the addition of potentially residents and businesses that are moving back and forth between the uptown segments, it made that a very poor project.
Of course, perfect timing for the train whistles behind us. I just want to make sure some of these comments that were brought up get some response. The concern about the town's financial condition, I guess I don't share that with our speaker tonight. I think the review of the financial condition, considering the economy, the general economy, and the what's happening within the state of Illinois, that our financial condition is pretty darn solid. The reference to new revenue, I don't believe what was said before in our financial review meant a new source of revenue. It meant new revenue from within our current revenues used in a different way. Am I
Correct. It
on that?
could involve external sources, but it also could involve just reappropriating revenue that we already have. We simply redirect it. But when you issue bonds, when you incur debt, you obviously have to identify a payment stream. So we have to identify that specific payment stream. It could also be outside sources like federal or state money. That's always a possibility, or grants or things like that. But it didn't mean that it required tax increases or that sort of thing. I mean, that works, but we don't anticipate any tax increases in the near term, certainly.
The sales tax increase that we passed, not too long ago, there's a good portion of that is only encumbered as we budget, and we haven't. The Connect Transit, obviously, it's a long-term commitment. There are other parts of that increase where we had identified places where we would like to put that money, trying to work together with the other municipality here to get that money in the right places. But short of that, in the meantime, we said we're gonna budget 1 year out with these
Correct.
funds so that we have flexibility the second year, the third year, or whatever. So
Absolutely.
that could be a source of new revenue.
Sure.
That's the type of thing.
The only
Yeah.
commitment this council has made thus far is an ongoing commitment to Connect Transit, and then, of course, mental health
Right.
funding with the county. And in fact, there's a mention about roads. Out of the sales tax alone this year, the council allocated $1.65 million just out of the sales tax. And we also have substantial money budgeted from other funds, motor fuel tax and other funds for road resurfacing and general road repairs. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it's well over $2 million. That's this year alone. And certainly in recent years, the council has dedicated substantial money to maintaining our road system. And we expect going forward that we will continue to spend at that level $1.6 to $2 million on road, just routine road repair. That's certainly our plan. So.
Just another remark. I think Uptown still seems really fresh and new, but Uptown has been going on for 15 years or so, So as I responded this morning when I was on the radio to some questions about this, and like I said, when I first saw the number, I thought, wow, that's a big number. But my sense was we're getting a pretty good return on that investment to set in motion a long-term project with Uptown too. If we don't get this gateway figured out and correct, then that's going to impact everything that happens south of the tracks. I mean, the future of the public library there that could jeopardize that if you don't have a good gateway from there to Uptown. Any future residential or other commercial, it's going to be much more attractive in the south side of the tracks if there is a good gateway to the current successful Uptown development. But we're talking something that's another, these things are going to occur over another long period of time, and certainly beyond my years of service, it may seem to some people like I've been here forever and probably will forever more, but probably not, so, but, so we're looking at another 15, 20-year project scope, and so we can focus on the here and now, but I think we're operating from a pretty solid financial situation, and even though, you want to go back 15, 16, 17 years, I had issues with the vision for Uptown, and that's what brought me back to the council, in fact, and took me to run a campaign for mayor, and yet, as we work through these things here, we work through them and come out on the other side stronger and with a better project and a place, a strong foundational place development-wise on which to launch an Uptown 2.0. You know, how do you even think about Uptown 2.0 if the current Uptown development didn't do what it's done and is continuing to do? You know, shortly, we're going to have some construction starting, and obviously there were some, tough moments with that on the circle there, but we overcame those. They weren't, many of them weren't of our doing. They were previous developers who made promises and said they could deliver and couldn't, and so, but we're finally getting that going. So I think it's like the fire station study. I mean, the fire station study is building a new headquarters station and relocating others, but that isn't all happening in the next 3 to 5 years. These
Correct.
things are long-term, and that's what we have to look at. And to me, getting this figured out is the key to Uptown 2.0 really having a chance to be successful. And yes, this is a big chunk of money. As Mr. Peterson said, we've budgeted for this. We anticipated this. We have done other studies, but none of them with the scope of this one. They really got us to the point where we seriously could consider this. And so now we really have to do the serious thing, in my way of looking at it. So enough from me.
And I'll add to that, Mr. Peterson and I were talking a few days ago. A lot of people don't realize this has been going on for 15 years. And we've done some very innovative things in the Uptown. Things like the traffic circle, things that have done there that have never been done anywhere in the United States. And frankly, they've been hard. Every project, every sub-component of the Uptown project was hard, very difficult. Took a lot of creative thinking, some giving and taking in the project. And I don't see Uptown 2.0 being any different, because it's going to be an innovative project, and it will, I think you're very accurate in your time frame, 15 to 20 years before we see what we're seeing now in Uptown. Ms. Gaines?
Well, I was just going to say, when we were doing our homework way back, when we visited some communities who were working in their downtowns to see what they were doing, and some had been very successful already, some were in the process, and how to do it, and what to do, and blah, blah, blah. But one of the main things they said is you can never be done. Once you become done, it becomes stagnant. You lose business, you lose businesses, you end up 20 years down the road with the same kind of nothingness that you had before you started. And we saw that in our Uptown, because some 20 years before we started all of this, they had done some upgrades and done some things to downtown normal, and then they stopped, and it was nothing else was done. And so then it all started to deteriorate and decay, and nobody spent any money in Uptown, or downtown then. And it was kind of the core of the center that as you look around the country, the cores of the centers, if they're falling apart, your whole city's going to fall apart. And so that's been what's so wonderful about this, is that we have done our homework. We've planned, we've done some hard work, and we've made hard decisions over time. It's not easy to come up here and vote yes for something that, wow, I'd never see that kind of money in my pocketbook, but it's of my own. But in the long run, we've seen with the amount of money we've spent, the return of money that's come into the Uptown in buildings and different businesses that are bringing more money into this community. When the TIF is done, all of that property tax and all is going to be coming back to all of the entities that are still getting their share they had before. But wow, there's going to be all this extra for people. And it's not just about, wow, do we need to, save this amount of money now, or do we need to spend money to have more money in the future for our community? Because we can't make it with just houses. We can't have enough taxes to keep roads going, keep the fire department going, keep the police department going. We just can't do it. And so you have to be innovative in order to be able to have a community that we all want to live in, that's safe, that's pleasant, that you want your kids to grow up in, and you want your grandkids to come back and visit.
Ms. Lorenz?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of points I guess I want to make here, and then I'll end with a question. But in regards to the comments that were shared with us, and I appreciate the speakers who came forward tonight. As a newer member here on the council, it has taken me a while to get my head wrapped around the fact that this over-under whatever kind of pass we have to have track crossing is a project that has morphed from what was once, I think this is a very salient point, what was once simply getting Amtrak passengers up, over, and down, to then that project kind of intersected with the project of the next level of development that Ms. Gaines is just speaking about for the future of expanding upon the economic development of Uptown. And thus was born Uptown 2.0 or Uptown South. And when those two projects kind of intersected, that's when the project scope of this whatever crossing morphed. And it morphed from moving passengers getting on and off trains to now moving a community from one part of the community to another across I guess it's not really a natural barrier, but is a barrier. And so I think that's very important to understand that was sort of what made the light click on for me, is that we can't really go back and just always look at this as, well, you started out just wanting to do a passenger movement item. It morphed. It morphed the minute we started to look at economic development in Uptown 2.0. That's how I understand it. Stop me if I'm wrong. Okay, I see at least Mr. Fritson has been here a lot longer than me. So with that said, and maybe that's helping some people in the audience, the other thing I want to say to the study, and yes, I was the one that was reading the fine print of the Exhibit A. I had some time on an airplane, some in-flight reading time, but it is important to me, and I hope it reflects the fact that that the wording is changing, because for me, I do really want to see the results of this feasibility study, and I really do want them to be required, not just may be required, but will require an evaluation of all identified alternatives. And that's the to-build alternatives and the no-build. So I can say up here that my mind's not made up. I am eager to see what some of the best minds will put together on this in terms of alternative analysis. And I really want to see a very rigorous analysis of the alternatives or the no-build alternatives. So I'm sitting up here saying I am eager to look at what this answer is going to be, and the answer is not already in my head. So I appreciate the depth and the expertise that we're bringing to the table to make this very important, help us make this very important decision. The last thing I guess I want to say is I was taking a lot of notes here from our speakers, and I see Mr. Brown over here, and I know he knows the roads better than almost anybody. We are pouring a lot of money into our roads, and it does exceed the dollar amount that's being discussed here. Now, it's really apples and oranges. I mean, one sense we're talking economic development, and then with respect to roads, you're talking infrastructure, which in some direct, perhaps indirect way, also helps to maintain and spur on more growth. But the number in my mind far exceeds it. I think it's in the two, like you said, the $2+ million, and that's what came to my mind as well.
It's actually, I did a quick.
Is it closer to
If you
three?
look at what we spent just this year, what we budgeted on roads, that includes roads, bridges, sidewalks, traffic signals, it's $7.2 million.
Oh, my. Well, all right, there you go.
That's the
Yeah,
total
yeah.
that we
I had
budgeted,
$3
and
million
most
in
of
my
that will be
head,
spent.
so there you go, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right, so thank you for doing that math, and just for, again, for folks who maybe are wondering, just the relative spending, what are we spending on X versus Y? I think those priorities are okay and are right side up and not upside down. So those are all my comments, I guess, more about this is an economic development issue. The study is important to me, and the roads, I believe, the infrastructure we do have in proper perspective. So with that said, my only question, to one that was mentioned by one of our speakers tonight, why are we going with an outside firm? And I believe this was raised when we talked about this at a previous meeting, but maybe you can address that again.
Again, when we select consultants, and this, a very high-level selection that we don't normally get involved in, but it's quality-based selection process, and all of our consultants basically are selected this way. And there are rules for how we do that. So when we form a selection committee and we gather the people and we read their qualifications, it's all about quality or experience. So that's the way we typically pick professional services for projects like this. And that's very well known and supported by the industry, and most all communities in the state selects their consultants based on quality-based selection. So fee by design is not an issue when you select this consultant. So that is always negotiated at a later date. So that, and the other question is related to this particular firm. Most of the folks here are in state. So although WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff is based out of New York as a corporation, this project will be managed, and most of the personnel will come from their Chicago office. They have other consultants like Ratio, who's based out of Champaign, that will be involved. Another couple of a DBE firm that's based out of the Peoria area is involved, as well as another surveying firm based out of the Chicago area. So most of the work is being performed by folks that are in state. However, because it is a large company with a lot of resource, if we need those folks from this firm, they're out of state, they can certainly bring in experts from outside.
And if I remember correctly, too, you said that these are some of the best and brightest minds, particularly when it relates to railroad. Is that not correct?
Yes, I mean,
Experience
the firms
and so
that we
forth?
interviewed, most of them have good experience in railroad
Okay.
engineering. This firm, in particular, is very familiar with this project, has worked on this project a lot, very familiar with the railroad and others involved, but do have a lot of expertise in railroad engineering, as well as funding and a lot of the other aspects that are required for this project.
So I guess, I appreciate that kind of reminder. And then to the point Mr. Fritzen was bringing up on dollars, just doing some really quick and rough math here, this is a lot of money. It is, without a shadow of a doubt. It's a lot of money. But when you think about the scope, as I started out my comments, the scope of this is, as someone has already said, we're looking at something that could shape 15, 20 years down the road. So when you look at that over, as your numerator of what you're spending today over the denominator of the project itself, and potentially the impact of the development of Uptown, it starts to become a small percentage of the total, and therefore, to me, starts to feel like decisions that I make at work all the time. If I invest a little money to know that I'm going in the right direction, if I do a study so that I know where to spend the next 90% of my marketing dollars, that's a good decision for me at work. And so I kind of see that in the same way, that, yeah, we're spending some money, and it's a big ticket, but it's, in the big scheme of things, a small amount to be able to put us in the right direction or know that we're going in the right direction. So we don't want to miss on the big dollars, on the denominator. We want to know that we're going in the right direction, whether that be up or down or no build at all. So to the point of, boy, this is a lot of money, that's how I sleep at night, is knowing that in the big picture of things, when you do the numerator over the denominator, it's a single-digit percentage.
I think it's important to point out, too, that if you look back in history when this project started, the Uptown project, we were spending similar dollars on consultants, and there was some outcry on that, saying you're spending too much money. But we knew that the plan we were undertaking was bold, and we had to have the best and brightest minds behind it, and we had to have all that preliminary work done to drive our decisions, and it paid off in the long term.
Well, and just like there was maybe good rigorous discussion then, I appreciate the comment and the discussion we're having today, so thank you.
Mr. McBride?
I almost feel like this is a filibuster. For us, anyway. I've been scribbling notes here. I'll try not to be too repetitive. So if I am, I apologize, but there's been a lot to digest. So, first of all, Ms. Gaines mentioned the fact that, a project like Uptown is never really finished. But if you want to talk about a project that's never finished, that would be roads. I mean, they are never finished. And I think our community and our staff deserves a lot of credit for prioritizing. They're constantly evaluating our roads. They're constantly prioritizing our roads. Could they be better? Always. But I do enjoy whenever you hear someone who's just spent some time in California or Georgia or Texas or a warmer clime who will come back and say, my, the roads are so much better there. Well, I'm sure they are, because they don't go through 30 to 40 freeze-thaw cycles between November and the end of March. And that takes a toll on roads. And we have that's the misfortune of the climate we've all chosen to live in. So again, roads could always be better, but I feel pretty good about what we're doing. Again, $1.4 million is a lot of money. I'm sure everyone, that if there's anybody in this room or anybody watching or listening to this tonight for whom that is not a lot of money, congratulations to you. However, the word that I've not heard tonight is investment. This is an investment in the kind of community we want to have long-term. Not just 15 to 20 years, but 50, 75, 100 years. We're all stewards, and I think if sometimes something I'm frustrated with on a national scale is we're spending a little too much time talking about 6 to 12 months and not enough time talking about a couple of generations away. We're doing our due diligence here, and I feel pretty good about that despite the price tag. It's also worth noting too that there has been a public process, and there will continue to be a public process through this. We will continue to seek input. We have received in the council before, like Mrs. Lorenz, I'm fairly new, but the council before us received a lot of public input on this. There will continue to be public input on this, and frankly, a lot of people, and I understand the reservations by some, but a lot of people are also very excited about the investment we're making and the kind of community that we are building here. So just something else to keep in mind. And I believe Mr. Fritzen, so I'll repeat it because I think it's worth underscoring. We are in pretty sound financial condition. Again, could we always be better? Sure. But AAA ratings are hard to come by, particularly in the state of Illinois. And we have one. And again, that's because of the long-term planning that was done by people long before me. And frankly speaking, some of the things where we're not where things could be better are things that are beyond our control. Changes in consumer behavior, investment returns on pension funds. These are not things that anybody in this room has any control over. So, sorry, I feel like I rambled a little bit tonight, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Please call the roll.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Gaines?
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. That concludes our business here tonight. Before I take a motion for adjournment, are there comments or concerns?
I was just going to say, it was a great event just before the council meeting where ISU and the town of Normal came together to light the trees for homecoming. So it's homecoming this week, and it's it's just fun, and my gosh, the big red marching machine was in Uptown, and if that doesn't get your blood moving, I don't know what does. So, thank you to everybody who was involved in that. It was fun.
And I think it's important to point out that the purpose of that was to demonstrate the incredible relationship that has been built between the town of Normal and Illinois State University. And having talked to university community mayors and around the United States, they are envious in the working relationship we have with our university and our community. I remember talking to one mayor that the community that they were in had a large university, and the mayor and the chancellor of that university hadn't spoken in 20 years. Where we're in a situation where I could call Larry right now and he'd answer the phone and say, "What's up, Chris?" And we've got a great relationship, and it's only getting stronger. So this was kind of an outward demonstration of that strong relationship. And to piggyback on what you said, if you're not doing anything this weekend, there's a pretty great set of homecoming activities at Illinois State University. Any further? Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Ms. Gaines.
Aye.
Mr. Fritzen.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. The what?
The roads in Georgia are terrible.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about property tax caps, Joe and I were. I'm like, see? What is it?
Okay.
Here's your tax cap. Yep.
That's funny.
Tell our senator that.
90% of the population in Illinois goes to Chicago. Their sales tax rate is about 11%.
Can if they want. They want to do
So-
that, and do them together.
Pulling facts out of the air.
It's up to you. You may come down. Okay.